Well, welcome to another episode of the Sunday Extra podcast with Hope Church. I'm Matt Sturdevant, the lead pastor here at Hope Church, and with me today is Rick Myers, our groups director. Rick gave the message on Sunday where we talked about becoming the new you relationally. In fact, this Sunday, we wrapped up our series on the new you. So I'm excited to have Rick with us today. Today, we're going to get to learn a little bit more about Rick's story, and you'll get to know him as our groups director. Rick, you started as our groups director on January 1st of this year, officially.
That's right.
And you're a pharmacist by trade. So let's start with what do you do when you're not directing groups for us here at Hope Church?
Well, how I answer that question typically makes my wife mad, because what I usually say when people ask me what I do is I say I do drugs, and she always like, don't say that. But yeah, I'm a pharmacist. I've been doing that for 30 some years now, and I currently work for a hospital system in the area, and I work over I'm the head of pharmacy for a couple of the hospitals.
Okay.
And I've got a crew of about 100 employees between the two sites. I've got a management team on each campus that I help oversee, and I've got a really good team on both sides. So
That's great.
yeah.
So you started out doing drugs, and now you're leading and managing those who do the drugs.
Yeah, most of my time is really administration, not so
Okay.
much on the front lines. Yeah.
Good. Well, we're really excited to have you as our groups director at Hope Church this year. For those who maybe hadn't heard us give some of the announcements, you're actually serving at a staff level, but a volunteer staff member, because you have your full-time career, and then you're working with us with groups this year. So we're really grateful for you taking on this additional assignment and all of the spare time
Right.
that I'm sure that you have, given
Right.
especially everything going on with COVID. That's probably been things have been a little bit different than maybe they had previously.
Yeah, it's been a really remarkable year, of course, and it's been really busy. But one thing just to know about the group life is that I'm not by myself. We have a groups coordinator, Randall Robinson, who's been a real help. And we have tremendous coaches in the group system. We've got a group of coaches that are just very seasoned and talented people that have, I think without that structure, that this would be this sounds like a much bigger and time-consuming job, maybe without knowing the rest of the story.
Right.
Because
Right.
I've got a lot of support, and a lot of people that are really help pulling the weight.
Yeah, that's great too. That's the way the whole church works. The whole
Yeah.
body of Christ is that we all have different parts and roles to play, and as we team together, we can do
Sure.
so much more than any one of us could do on our own. I get the title of lead pastor, but I don't do everything. There's lots of things I don't even. I always enjoy when someone asks me a question and they think I should know the answer to that, right? Because I'm the lead pastor, and I'm like, you know what? I don't know that. I don't know the answer to that question, but I know who you can talk to about that. And you also don't want me knowing the answer to that or doing that, because I couldn't do it as well as the person who's doing it
Exactly.
does. So, well, let's kind of back up a little bit. One of the things I wanted this opportunity to be for people to get to know you a little bit better. You've been here at Hope for over 30 years,
Right.
but let's back up and share just your spiritual journey. How did you become a follower of Jesus?
All right. How back do you want to go?
Well, we can start when you were born if you want.
Well, I did grow up in a great family, really loving family. I had great parents. I would say, as a family, and certainly as me, we were God fans. We were people that went to church. We went to a more liturgical church, faithfully, but I wasn't a follower. More of a fan. That certainly wasn't a follower. While I appreciated God and certainly had a God context to my life, there really wasn't he didn't make a lot of difference in my decisions or how I lived. So fast forward, I, again, we grew up in a small town, and I was heavily involved in sports. And really, in high school, I had about three things that mattered, and one was sports, one was girls, and one was just being cool.
Okay.
And if I had to rank those, I don't really know what I'd put first. Probably just being cool would be the top thing. But so that was really just that's all I lived for. That's all I thought about. And then one night after one of I think I was 15. I have to go back and get that exact date. I think I was 15. Wasn't quite old enough to drive, but I remember my buddy and I, because this is what we did. We would when we would know one of our parents were gone, and when they were gone on the weekend, we would go out driving around and doing things we shouldn't be doing. And that's what I had done that night. And later that evening, the state peas came to my house, and I was very concerned. Well, what they were doing, they were bringing my parents because my brother had just died in a plane wreck.
Oh, wow.
And that was like, ooh, wow. And so I was thinking I'm in trouble. Next thing I know is I've just lost my brother. And it was just a huge turning point in my life because, I just wasn't ready for that at all. Talk about just a total shock.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I kind of spent the next, and my brother was 3 years older, and he actually was very kind to me. I mean, we brotherly fought at times, but we had a really strong relationship. And so had my sister and my brother and I, we all had good relationships, but they certainly weren't perfect. But when he died, I really floundered for the next about year and a half, just not really knowing what to do. And interestingly, my brother's friends, they didn't really know how to grieve. And one of the ways they did that was including me, which now they were, older, and most of them had either graduated from high school. This was during the summer, and then the following year, or they were going to be seniors. But so now I'm being included in the cool kids, especially. So I'm especially cool now because now the older kids are reaching out to me, and they'd take me to their parties, and we would do things I regret doing, but I was cool. And that went on for, I don't know, like I said, about a year and a half. And at some point, my sister invited me to a meeting that was going to be held at our high school, and it was going to be the Fellowship of Christian Athletes. And it was going to be, some speakers were going to be there that I recognized because they played for the Nebraska Cornhusker football team. And at the time, that actually meant something. They were actually really good back then. They weren't that good now, but there was years ago when they were sort of the team that everyone wanted to beat. And anyway, so I wanted to hear those guys. And so my sister kind of drugged me there. I was a little bit not so sure, but she really was the impetus to say, you're going with me. So I went, and these guys were talking, of course. I'm sitting with a couple other my friends that showed up, guys that also, I didn't know they were going. And they showed up, and they must have been drugged there too, because one of them was elbowing me and basically saying, as these guys were talking about Jesus and their relationship with God, they were saying, like, this is a load of BS. And I'm like, yeah, this is a bunch of baloney. But I didn't mean that. I was just saying that because I was really listening to what they had to say. Because
you wanted to be cool.
I wanted to be cool. But I was totally locked in and dialed in what they were saying. I don't remember all what they said, but I just remember they had a life behind what they were sharing that I just didn't have. I could tell there was meaning and real purpose there. And so one of the guys just basically said, hey, why don't you... I remember thinking, what's my take home from this meeting? Because again, I think it was in the spring. It had been about a year now since my brother died. And they were going to start the chapter up next fall, I think, at our high school. And they did. But anyway, the take home was, over the summer, start reading your Bible. At least that's what I remember hearing. So that's why I started doing that. I had a Bible. It was just a New Testament. And I started reading, and I read that thing over and over through wow. just kept reading it. And I had never really done that. And I think at some point in time, I don't have a really good date or time or story, but it became very real to me. And I don't know, Ruth Graham once made the statement, that Billy Graham's wife, that I don't know when the sun came up, I just know that he is shining. And I sort of have a similar probably history of that, because at one point in time, God became very close to me during that summer, because I just kept reading, and I think I developed a relationship there with him. But then I went through high school, didn't really grow much. Did get involved. That FCA chapter was, it was helpful, but it didn't really teach me how to walk with God. I went to college, and I went to college to play football at the University of Wyoming. And when I got there, there was a group of guys that recruited me very quickly to their Bible study. And that was one of my goals. I was like, when I get to college, I want to get involved in a Bible study. And I had no idea what that meant. And these guys were really helpful, great bunch of fellas. But after a few of those, I had another buddy that grabbed me and said, hey, you know what? I'm going to ask you to instead to go to a different Bible study with me. And this is my roommate. He was actually on the team, and he was from Nebraska, so that's how I selected him as a teammate, because we played in an all-star game together. We met at the previous summer. So you go to college, you don't know anybody, right? And so it's like, I'll room with whoever I know. And anyway, so he's like, why don't you go with me to this other one? I'm not going to tell you really why. Just trust me. I'm like, okay. And so he ended up taking me to his other Bible study. And I learned later that the first one I went to was a little bit off.
Okay.
And he recognized that. And, and it wasn't anything I would have ever known the difference, to be honest, because I was such a new follower. And so I got involved with this other bunch, and it eventually became part of a student ministry that the guy that led the Bible study also led a student ministry. And that was a huge turning point, because I got very involved with Bible study for a while, but eventually I had to do night labs because of my football commitment. And I was in pharmacy school. And the only way to get in labs in was doing them at night. Well, I had to miss the Bible study. And so then I started going to this campus ministry. And that was really when I started walking with Jesus. Because I really learned how to have a quiet time, and how to share my faith, and I started memorizing scriptures. And that was a real turning point there.
That's great. So you went to the University of Wyoming. You're from Nebraska. How did you wind up in Fort Worth, Texas?
Yeah, well, that's an interesting question. I met my wife there, Teresa, and I. She also was not a believer when she went to college. She became a believer through this ministry. There were some young gals that reached out to her and shared their faith with her, and she eventually became a believer while in college. And I didn't know her that year, because I didn't start going. Like I said, I think it was my spring of my sophomore year when I started attending the large group ministry. But so eventually we got to know each other at that point, and we both heard the same story. And I ended up being there 5.5 years, because my schooling was 5, and I got behind because of my football. And anyway, so I was there for a bit, and I eventually got part of the leadership team at the student ministry. And the leader of that, we don't always remember the same what he said, but it's funny. But
something made an impression on you.
What he said. Here's what he said. Basically, he put 10 people up against the wall, and he said, statistically, in 10 years, only 2 or 3 of you will still be walking with Jesus. Now, the number is what we all kind of. Was it 2? Was it 3? What was that number? But whatever it was, I just remembered I didn't want to be one of those 7 that weren't walking with Jesus. So I was really that just stuck with me, that comment. Fast forward, then he said, as seniors were getting ready to graduate from college, one of the comments that same guy said was, you really ought to think about picking your church before you pick the city that you go live in, which I thought at first was like radically strange and didn't make any sense until I thought about it. And the more I thought about it, I'm like, that makes a lot of sense. And so he actually gave us a list of churches across the United States. It wasn't a super long list of churches he recommended, and Hope Church was one of them. So
did you move here specifically for Hope, and then you were going to find your job and start pharmacy, or did you say, okay, well, I know there's a pharmacy potentials in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, so like what did that look like for you?
Yeah, and on top of that, I actually thought about going to seminary, because I don't know why. I just thought, well, if you're spiritual, you got to go to seminary, right? That's what you do, and so I thought about that too. But the more I prayed about that, the more I really sensed that God was not leading me to do that. But Fort Worth had a seminary, so that helped Hope Church be maybe more in the running, if you will. Okay. But no, when I decided I was just going to come for church, it was all about coming for this church, and it had nothing to do with at the time, pharmacy they'd hire basically anybody if you walked and chewed gum. I know that sounds crazy, but there was a real need for pharmacists at that point. And so I was not terribly concerned about finding a job.
Okay.
So that's what I did. I came down here. Before I moved, I actually did some interviewing and moved down here finally.
Yeah. And one of the things that's interesting about that is I got some of, it was different words, but I got some of the similar advice. And for me, I went to a Christian university in California, and I don't know what the statistics are, but I've got names and faces in my mind right now of people that I went to Christian university with who I either know are not walking with Jesus, or there's a huge question. So, I mean, I think that's a pretty universal, just as a universal principle is you've got to be connected into community.
You sure do.
Which, that's what we talked about on Sunday was becoming the new you relationally, and that we've got to have people in our lives. The first and most important relationship is the one with Jesus.
Yeah.
But this is not a lone ranger, just me and Jesus. We've got to have people in our lives. So you've been a part of groups one way or another pretty much since you moved to be a part of Hope.
Yep.
Groups have been called different things at different times, different names. Right now we have life groups, connection groups, and explore groups. When you first came to Hope, they were called something different. Yep. But just talk for a few minutes about what impact has being in a group, being committed to other believers, what has that had on you personally, and just sort of the fruit of the life that you have now? You showed us a picture on Sunday of your family. You have a large family. Yeah. We talk about Hope being a multi-generational church, and your family is a great picture of that. And that your adult children and grandchildren are attending our church. But I know that groups have had a big part of that. So just tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, as you said, the groups were called something different back when we came. But when my wife and I first moved here, she actually moved ahead of me by a few months. I got to think that through. She moved ahead of me by a few months because I had one more semester to finish. Okay. So she was here for a bit before I graduated, and she got involved in a group, and so I kind of watched from afar how she was attending. She really appreciated the people she was with, and so when I came, at that time it was similar, I guess, in some ways, that there were guys groups and there were gals groups and there were couples groups, and they all met in homes, and so I kind of picked the group that was sort of more similar to the same sort of the gals that were single and ish and maybe almost newly married or whatever. And so I kind of picked a similar group, but I also picked a group of, I knew a guy from Wyoming that was also here. And I didn't know him very well, but he was also ahead of me before he came down. And so I wanted to be a part of his group. And it was just what I didn't expect. And what I mean by that is these guys were, they were totally the same guy on Sunday as they were the rest of the week. And I got to realize these guys were not trying to impress anybody. They weren't pretentious. They were just, there was no one trying to impress anybody. And I was still in a mode of trying to impress people. I came out of that. I don't know if sports was that made for me, but I was still kind of, really trying to impress people. And these guys just were so disarming because that's not what they were trying to do. They're trying to be real. And it really was remarkable. I loved it so much because they led out in being honest and open, and this whole hard attitude thing was new to me. But my goodness, I'd latched onto the hard attitudes. At least the principles, they just made so much sense.
You got to experience them,
and they lived them out. It wasn't like I had to get a sermon. They just were living them in front of me. So it was really helpful.
Yeah. So then you have done, it sounds like, every variety of groups, men's groups. You've been involved in couples groups. How has the type of group that you've been a part maybe changed or morphed based on life stage that you might be going through?
Yeah, I think that we were more likely to do guys and gals groups when we had kids, for sure, because the babysitting just got to be challenging. There were, that was always just a challenge. Is how do we do a guys group so I can hang out with the kids when she goes, when Teresa went to her ladies group or whatever. So that seemed to help sort of dictate what group we selected as much as anything, just what the childcare needs and situations and opportunities were. Yeah. And I've seen a lot of creative ways to do childcare with groups. So,
and this last year we've done something we've never done. We've had virtual groups, Zoom groups. So that's, just in some ways the childcare gets maybe easier because I've heard of groups meeting later when the kids go to bed.
That's right.
I've got small kids and we're doing good if we can get them in bed at 6:30. Then we've got a few hours in the evening to just have to ourselves. Yeah. So it takes work though. It takes work on planning. So for you personally, when you've had to shuffle things around in your schedule, you've had to be inconvenienced. Talk about for a minute the value of go ahead and be inconvenienced to be a part of the group.
Well, that's a good word, because anything we do that's worth anything is going to be inconvenient. Mm-hmm. And it took effort, and it still does. It takes effort and time to commit to. I'm going to give up a night. I'm going to. If I really want to commit to that, and that's really I think the only way you really gain from a group is if you really commit to it. It's not like, oh, if nothing else comes up that's more important, then I'll attend group. Right. But rather, no, I'm going to attend group, and it's going to take something pretty serious to trump that, because I really do want to be a part of that community. But yeah, it is never easy to give up time to be a part of something that, but. After we did it for a few years and we saw the value, and we continue to see the value, there was never really a thought of, I'm not going to be in a group, because I've just seen so much value come back to us. I shared a story in the sermon on the New You Relationally about a friend that, didn't want to buy a pickup because he didn't want to help people move, and how, and really just, I shared just how important that was. When I thought about that the people that have helped us over the years were people in our groups. And we've had all kinds of help we've needed from people. When challenging times have come, or you needed another move. We've moved a few times. And just the number of people who have come into those situations to come alongside us were largely the people that we did life with through these different groups. Yeah. And it's really meaningful.
Yeah, I think... especially when life is going good and everything is great, it's really easy to think, I don't need people. I can do it. I'm okay.
Right.
But that's the very time when you should be investing in relationships and building these relationships. And I've talked to so many people throughout this last year that have encountered some really difficult times as we've walked through everything that we've walked through since March of 2020. And they tell their stories. They tell about how people loved them and helped them and cared for them and were just there. And every one of them, as I've heard them talk about that, they're all ones who have heavily invested in relationships in the past. So it's, we think maybe it's not as important as it is until it is. And then you get to really reap the benefit.
That's right. And, our founding pastor, Harold Bullock, and I'll probably goof this section all up, but he talked about a Greek word that was koinonia, and that really, the flavor of that is that it's a reciprocity, meaning that, we help people, and in turn, we will be helped. Now, we're not doing it to make, I'm not doing it to hold it over you, now you got to help me, but just that just becomes who we are. We help people, and what we understand is that then I help others because someone's helped me, and that's how the body of Christ just is strengthened by that. Yeah. So, was I even close on the Greek word?
Yeah, okay. You're doing good. So, as our groups director this year, right now we're in the middle of sign-ups for our spring semester of groups. It's going to start the week of Valentine's, the week of Sunday, February 14th. Anything else you'd like to say to those listening just about groups and make your Make your appeal to why
All right,
people not in a group
last
should
chance
consider.
appeal right here.
That's
Okay.
right.
Well, I think one thing that I think a really good way to say this is that hope leaders have been proven. So if you haven't been in a group before and you're wondering about the leader itself, these are people that have shown themselves faithful. So you can be trustworthy. You can trust the fact that they have proven themselves trustworthy to be a leader. So they're vetted. And they have coaches behind them. Each of these group leaders have people that are help coaching them to really pray for them and encourage them and help them through the way. So I think there can be some comfort in the fact that, we don't just allow anybody to lead, because we really want someone who's shown themselves faithful. And then secondly, just that I think sometimes I think people that may not be as fully invested in a church might be waiting for someone to really pour into them and make them feel more included. And that is true, but at the same time, don't wait for someone else to come and throw you the life, whatever that thing called in the swimming pool.
The life preserver.
The life preserver. That really take initiative. Don't sit there and wait for someone. Don't wait for it to come to you. But taking initiative to just simply signing up for a group, I think you're never going to regret it. By learning, by meeting new people, and really as we have the group set up, is basically an opportunity each semester to sign up for a different group and meet another group of different people. And that expands your relationships in the church. It'll expand the people that really know you and that will be praying for you and that will actually be able to come alongside you when you do go through challenges. Because it's just a matter of time.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of time for all of us to go through some real challenging times. And doing life with people that know you is really helpful. Now, you have to be willing to be known. And I think that's the other thing. I think to be willing to be vulnerable, to actually share your struggles so that people can actually pray for you and maybe give you help and advice and counsel. And because I know that's been a real game changer for Teresa and I. When we've been vulnerable enough to share, we need help here, or I need some insight in something that I just don't know how to handle. And allowing people to come in and speak to our lives and encourage us and sometimes point us a different direction that's where group life gives you those relationships to gain that wisdom that you're not going to gain on your own. While you can come to church and get great teaching, it's just not enough. There's just more there.
Yeah. I mean, as the lead pastor of Hope Church, it's not enough. What I say on Sunday morning,
right?
It's not enough.
It's not enough.
Gathering as a church is very important, but it's not enough to just come on Sunday morning. I mean, my life, would look very different than it does today if all I ever did was listen to sermons once a week. But it's actually been being real with people like you're talking about, people who know me, who know what I struggle with, who could encourage me. Earlier you mentioned the hard attitudes, and one of them is live an open, honest life before others. And the way we talk about that is the person being presented on the outside needs to reasonably match the person on the inside. So if you're struggling with something, you don't just tell everybody, oh, it's fine, I'm fine, because you're not fine. Now, you also don't just gush to everyone every gory detail of what's going on in your life, but you've got to have a group of people that you can be real with, that you risk a little and you share, and then you see how they respond to you in kindness and in love. And as you do that over time, you actually can move forward. And it's a tremendous blessing to have others know you. Like, we're afraid that people are going to find out something and then reject us, right? And not want to know. But when we pretend to have it all together, people know we don't.
People know you don't. It's really obvious, honestly.
It is.
It gets to be pretty clear.
So actually at that point, the only one we're fooling is ourselves, because everybody else knows. And I think, just want to make a quick comment. I'm really glad you brought up the fact that we work with proven leaders because
Yeah.
the easiest group, like in your story, you shared a couple of times that you joined groups that you knew the leader or you knew
Right.
people. So
Right.
those
Right.
are the easiest ones to join.
Yeah.
But if you're newer around, if you don't know the leader, or maybe you just don't know anybody in the group, that's why we put a huge emphasis on selecting leaders and training leaders and
Yeah.
coaching leaders, because this leader is representing us as the church, and we're saying that, not saying this person is perfect, because none of us are perfect, but this person is qualified to be your group leader, somebody that you can trust. And when we don't know anyone, don't have relationships, we have to start somewhere. So
Right.
so we take that very seriously, and over the years we've had to ask people to step down from leadership if something was going on in life, then we could no longer say they were a qualified leader, and we helped them get on a path to restoration. But if you don't know the leader or you don't know anybody in the group, that should never be a barrier for joining the group.
Right. Yeah. And I think that can be a hurdle a little bit for people because they don't know who that person is. That can be a challenge. But again, I certainly encourage the risk. And, COVID's been a bit of a mess because we can't see people as much, especially if we're doing online groups. We might not be here at the building. But that day is going to end at some point. And I think another way to, if you're not quite ready to do groups, is maybe you just join a team here. One of the service teams, the coffee team or the greeting team, the town hall team. There's other things that you can join. When I first came to Hope, thought this was something I might want to share, just that we didn't have a building.
Right.
So we were a mobile church for, 20
years?
20 years. And when I came in 1986, 87, Hope had been around for, 6-8 years at that point in time. But we were meeting in hotels, and the team that I served on was the equipment team. And most people at some point served on the equipment team because you had to set up church every Sunday. And so we would literally show up at the hotel. We would, the first few years, people who had pickups, we would be loading stuff from a storage unit to their pickups and take it to the hotel. And eventually we started renting a moving van to put all our sound equipment in, whatever. But, you start doing things with people and rubbing shoulders against people because there's a task to be done, because literally people were coming to do church, and if you didn't get your task done, it was obvious. The chairs weren't up, the music wasn't going, et cetera. But that's just another way to get to know people, is to actually start just rubbing shoulders with them on a team.
Yeah, that's right. Well, Rick, I want to shift gears slightly. The Sunday Extra podcast is usually when we reflect on what we talked about the previous Sunday, so that's why we've been talking about groups and relationships, and I'll let you sort of share your story a little bit. This coming Sunday, we're going to do a message called Invest and Invite. We're going to talk about the power of an invitation. That often, we make this. We make sharing Christ with others maybe more difficult than it has to be.
Right.
We build it up in our mind, and it just becomes this thing that we make it harder than it has to be. Right. Not that it's easy, but we make it harder.
Right.
So we're going to be talking about inviting, and as you shared with us, you're not a full-time pastor on staff. You
No.
work a regular job.
Right.
And this is Saturday when we're recording this, and so you got home from work at some point yesterday, and today's your weekend, and you're here recording this with me. But I wondered if you could just share for a few minutes what has been your experience over the years as you have tried to live the life of a Christ follower at work, as you're involved in other activities, and then how you have invited people along the way, and just a little bit of what that's looked like for you personally.
Right. Well, I would start by saying I don't know how well I've done it, or how frequently enough I've, as I think about it, I wish I would do it more frequently than I do, to be very honest. But I think that simply being real with people is where you start. And if my church and my faith are that important to me, then I don't think I will need to hold that back for 2 years before I ever share that with someone. What I mean by that, if I have a relationship with somebody, I want to let them know fairly early on in that relationship that my faith's important in some way. It doesn't have to be an invitation immediately. It doesn't have to be some preaching or whatever. But just some sort of way to let them know how I identify that Jesus is an essential part of my life, so that they're not surprised by the fact that I might be wanting them to come to church with me. So for what that's worth, I think that's just something to get that out early is probably helpful.
Yeah.
And then, another thing I've done, at least at work, is that when people have issues that come up, struggles or whatever, and I have an office, and I've been surprised how many people, when they come in and sit down or share something that needs to be known because it's a business thing, right? They may need to be off for a few days or whatever, but just asking for the privilege, the opportunity, can I pray for that? And can we pray right now? And I've noticed that nobody ever says no.
Yeah.
I've never had anybody say no when I said, can I just pray for that real quick? And that sometimes gives then an opportunity to say, hey, this has been a real help to me. This church I go to has been a real help to me. Would it be something that you'd ever be interested in joining us? And hey, I've got this series coming, or this message coming, or maybe it's one of the holidays, it's Easter, Christmas, and I know there's going to be something that for them that may make sense to them, because of some folks are more likely to attend church on a Christmas or Easter time, but otherwise, I think that, and it doesn't have to be just the people I work with. So sometimes I've heard it said that, we almost visualize the people that we're around on a day-to-day basis as a landscape. That, meaning the people I get coffee from, or the nursery I go buy my plants for my house when I'm doing my yard work, or the guy at Home Depot or whatever. And stopping and thinking, wait a minute, if I see that person more frequently, maybe that's somebody I could actually just say something to and invite. And Teresa's actually pretty good about that. She's the one, like, there's that guy at the grocery store I'm always going to, and this lady here. And those are the people that maybe I ought to just share something with, or just even leaving, because you get to know those people over time. You actually do. They might not remember you that well, but they'll start remembering you when you start asking them questions. And then just start simply saying, hey, how was your day? Or how was this? And over time, you get to have a relationship with someone that you might never thought you could have. And taking the risk again to either share an invite card, or just simply tell them, hey, I go to this church, join me sometime. And you never know.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. What we don't know is we don't know what is going on the inside of that person. Only God knows the heart. We may see something that looks friendly or inviting, or we may see something that looks very standoffish, but God knows what's going on in their heart.
Right.
And, invitation too, one of the, our mission as a church is to invite people to discover and experience God's ways. And obviously a solid, tangible invitation is come to church with me. Yeah. But the invitation starts even before that. There's an invitation to a conversation. There's an invitation to, inviting somebody just in your life. You don't have to. I think this is when I said people make it harder than it has to be. The first words out of your mouth don't have to be
come to Hope Church.
Come to Hope Church. They also don't have to be you're a sinner. You need Jesus. There are steps we can take, and then as God presents the opportunity, maybe we do share the gospel. But as we invite people, we're thinking about it on a much bigger scale of just inviting them into our lives.
Well, thank you for sharing that, because really that's really how my typical modus of operation is that I will invite them to meet my friends, and typically the first thing I do is just what can I think of that they enjoy, that I can get to know some of my other Hope friends, because I've got lots of guys that are really good about meeting people and spending time with them. And there's a group of guys, again, prior to COVID, that we were meeting and playing pickleball weekly. And I had a couple different guys. One was a neighbor, and one was a guy I got to know at the gym I go to. which I don't go very often, but once a week. And this gentleman was there typically on the Saturday morning when I would typically go to the Y. And so my first thought is always, how can I get them to know my friends? Because if they get to know my friends, that's a less of a hurdle when I invite them to church. Because I'm saying, hey, when you go, you're going to already know this guy and this guy and this guy. And so that typically makes it a lot of an easier invite when you already can say, I won't be the only person you know when you arrive. That you already know several of my friends, and they'll be there.
Yeah. So what you just described is a very effective strategy, but I have heard from some, particularly some of our young adults, they're concerned about being disingenuous about if someone is meeting, if the only people that they're meeting are their church friends. So how have you handled navigating that? Because I mean, you're simply introducing people to your friends who happen to go to church. And again, there's this like, well, do you have to tell them, well, hey, who here goes to Hope Church? And everybody has to raise their hand. Now they feel awkward. But so just drill down a little bit further on that. Yeah.
Well, so let me just back up. In recent years, we've tried to have a Super Bowl party. Of the last, I don't know, 6 years, we've probably had one 5 times. This was before COVID, of course, but we would invite our neighbors and we would invite people from Hope. And it's never a big crowd. It's just been a small group. But the truth of that is neighbors already know the neighbor. So we have some neighbors that we just dearly appreciate and love, and as I bring my Hope people in, they just start to integrate, and it's not just all Hope people, or not. So I don't think that's a hurdle for me. Just I wouldn't be terribly concerned. The more people you can integrate that are both guests and Hope people, then I don't think anyone necessarily feels out of place.
It's more the internal barrier of what I'm thinking rather than what people are actually experiencing.
Absolutely. I have not sensed that became an issue in past. But
yeah, well, that's good. Anything else you want to say on that topic of inviting? I mean, I appreciate your humility. We all could do a better job of it, but I know you have intentionally, purposefully invited people, not just to church on Sunday, but you've invited people into your life over the years. Just anything else you want to say on this topic of inviting?
Yeah, I think prayer. If you're not praying about it, it's probably not going to happen. If you're doing it on your own juice and your own power, you're probably not going to get very far. And so, embarrassingly, I think the thing that embarrasses me is that I will go through periods of time when I haven't even thought to pray about inviting somebody. There'll be weeks and I'll go, oh my gosh, I didn't cross my mind, and how that's really where it starts. And I think that's and what we're asking is that God would bring people into our lives who are ready to have an invite, who want an invite, who have something that He is preparing behind the scenes for them to actually want to be included in an outing, to go to watch a football game together, or to go to get a coffee or go get a burger together, whatever that is. And then as that goes on, that relation continues, then you can build on. Again, I don't typically, the first invite typically is not, hey, come to Hope Church with me, but rather, how about we go get some coffee? How about we I got a lot of good burger places.
Yeah.
Some ones I really think are better than others, if you want to know. But.
Yeah. Well, and the point of it is, when there's something important to us, what we do is we share it, right?
Exactly.
I mean, you would tell your friend about this great restaurant that you discovered,
exactly.
Or man, there's this little hole-in-the-wall burger joint. I've never been there. I discovered it. You got to go there. So how much more is what we have in Jesus, the new life that we have, and it should just flow naturally out of our own walk with Jesus. It doesn't have to be this weird, awkward thing that we sometimes make it out to be. So it's both something that Jesus commands us to do. It's also a skill that we can learn and we can grow in.
And I don't recall a time I've regretted inviting someone. The only time I've regretted it is when I didn't take the courage to do it. That's when I've had some regrets. I wimped out.
Yeah.
I don't ever remember, ever, thinking, oh, I wish I wouldn't have invited them to that. Even if they aren't interested, it might take several invites until they actually are interested.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing. That's a little, it's a preview for our listeners of where we're going to go this coming Sunday. Since you are our new groups director, I thought I would just end with just a few more kind of random questions about you, kind of just rapid fire. So, mountains or beach?
Mountains, easy.
All right.
Yeah.
How about, what's your favorite flavor of ice cream?
You know, my wife has converted me to chocolate.
Chocolate?
It used to be more on the vanilla or strawberry, but I do like chocolate.
All right. What do you like to do in your free time when you have it?
Yeah, free time. Let me think about that. Yeah, I mentioned I like to go to the Y and anything revolving activity. I like to walk. If they're going to get a hike out of that, some sporting event. Even though I'm old now, I really enjoy activities. Cool. Doing stuff is what I like to do.
Doing stuff, not just sitting.
No, I don't want to sit. I
All right.
do stuff.
And then what's just something that God's been teaching you lately in your own quiet time?
Well, so I started in the book of Acts. I've been doing Acts for the last several weeks, and I kind of took a little tour of Acts differently this time, and I took a detour as I was going to some of the different cities. I'm in the area where Paul now is going throughout one of his missionary journeys, and I've been stopping and actually learning a little bit more about the city and the area and the people that he was speaking to. So most recently, I've been in Thessalonians, and I spent a little bit of time. This sounds way more impressive than it is because I haven't spent that much time on it, really. But I was actually digging in a little bit to more that, what was the city of Thessalonica like? Thessalonica. I'll get it.
It's a hard one to say.
Anyway, Thessalonica is still a city today. I mean, it's not like it's gone. It's still a live city today. Anyway, so I actually spent some time learning about that, and I really was trying to learn about the people. Who are the people in that chapter, in that verse, in that book that Paul is addressing? And so that's been actually really interesting. And part of that is that I think I've been really sensing that, we're going to see as believers in Christ, what you've shared from Sunday on your messages is that it looks like we're heading toward a time when we're going to have more challenges living out our faith. As believers in Jesus, there's probably more persecution coming our way, and we need to understand that that's not that unusual. And the Thessalonians understood that. And if you look at the first couple chapters, Paul's actually talking about the severe suffering that you endured, and how he talked about his suffering when he was in the church of Philippi, which is just not that far from Thessalonica, and how that was integral in who they were in their walk with Jesus. They understood that suffering was just part of. They didn't know any different, and so anyway, and the memory verse for this the message that we just gave on Sunday, this past Sunday, was out of 1 Thessalonians. And it was about, so encourage one another, and encourage them just as you are doing. But that's really setting up from the context of that is these are people who have had severe suffering. They are actually, there's some real persecution, and they're encouraging one another that, where's your hope going to lie? Who is it going to be? And they're really pointing to the fact that Jesus is absolutely in charge, and he's coming back, and they're really pointing to their future. That your eternity is secure, and be focused on what's coming in eternity. Be encouraged. That's really the point of that verse. So,
that's great. Thank you. Thanks for sharing. Just a little more, couple of personal questions at the end, and thank you so much for taking time today on this Saturday. I guess hopefully you didn't miss your time at the Y today by being here with us, but. Thank you for being my guest today and letting us get a chance to know you a little bit better.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity. Thanks, Matt.
And thank you for joining us for this episode of the Sunday Extra podcast with Hope Church. Want to invite you to join us on Sunday. If you're in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, you can join us in person at 1750 Beach Street in Fort Worth, Texas, or online at hopechurch.com, where, as we've been talking about, we're going to take a look at investing and inviting this Sunday. Hope to see you there.